Captain James Harper stood on the bridge of the USS Valor, the cold metal floor vibrating faintly beneath his boots as the warship cleaved through the restless sea. The endless expanse of gray water stretched toward the horizon, meeting a sky smeared with thick, low-hanging clouds that promised a brewing storm. The salty air whipped around him, mingling with the sharp scent of oil and the faint hum of the engines. His jaw was set, eyes scanning the radar screens and the restless crew bustling about. Harper was a man forged in discipline and fire, a career naval officer with decades of experience, navigating both the harsh oceans and the equally tempestuous tides of military command. He had earned his reputation through sheer grit and an iron will, his name whispered with respect and sometimes fear among the sailors under his command. But lately, even the hardest steel begins to fray, and Harper felt the strain of this mission, clawing at his nerves like the cold, biting wind outside. The Valor was on a delicate assignment, to patrol contested waters near a volatile geopolitical hotspot, keeping a watchful eye on foreign vessels and maintaining a fragile peace. The crew was aware that every move they made was being watched, analyzed by rival powers eager for any sign of weakness or provocation. The pressure was suffocating. Harper glanced behind him at the crew working the bridge, young faces full of determination, but also tension. They whispered in hushed tones, glancing nervously at the horizon and to the skies. He could feel the undercurrent of unease rippling through the ship. Rumors had been circulating for days. An unexpected inspection was coming, and the officer arriving wasn't just anyone. It was Admiral Laura Sinclair. Harper's mind tightened like a noose at the mention of her name. Sinclair was a legend in the Navy, brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely unyielding. Where Harper led with force and authority, Sinclair commanded with icy precision and an almost ruthless calm. She was the kind of leader who inspired fierce loyalty, but also stark fear, someone who never tolerated failure or disobedience. The mere thought of her presence sent a shiver down his spine. "Captain," the voice of his executive officer, Commander Mitchell, broke through his thoughts. "Radar reports show increased activity near the eastern flank. Could be surveillance drones." Harper's gaze sharpened. "Prepare to engage electronic countermeasures," he ordered, his voice steady but firm. "I want full situational awareness." Mitchell nodded and relayed the commands. Around him, the crew snapped into action, their movements efficient but tight with tension. The ship was alive with the hum of machinery and nervous energy. Harper turned to the panoramic windows of the bridge and looked out into the gathering storm. The clouds churned above like an angry beast, dark and foreboding. It was a fitting metaphor for what was happening inside the ship itself, an emotional tempest brewing beneath the surface of military order. He clenched his fists. His authority was already being challenged by the stress of the mission and the whispered rumors of Sinclair's arrival. He prided himself on control of the ship, the crew, the mission, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. The last thing he needed was to be second-guessed by an admiral who didn't even know the nuances of his command style. Harper's thoughts drifted to the crew. Many were younger officers, ambitious but inexperienced, some who questioned his sometimes harsh methods. They whispered among themselves about Sinclair's reputation and speculated about how the Admiral's visit might change everything. Some welcomed the challenge, others feared it. The captain rubbed the stubble on his chin, the weight of responsibility pressing down hard. He was more than a leader. He was a symbol to these men and women, the final line of defense against chaos both external and internal. And yet, he wondered how much longer he could hold it all together. Suddenly, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Captain Harper, Admiral Sinclair will be arriving on deck in 15 minutes. All crew are to be at attention. Mission briefing will commence immediately." The words hit Harper like a cold wave. He nodded stiffly and straightened his uniform. There was no room for hesitation. His mind raced through the protocols, the possible scenarios. The crew was already gathering, their faces taut with anticipation. He stepped out onto the main deck as the ship's bow sliced through the waves. The gray sky threatened rain, the air electric with static and tension. Moments later, a helicopter roared overhead, descending rapidly toward the ship's landing pad. Harper watched as the door swung open, revealing a tall woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper demeanor, Admiral Lara Sinclair. She moved with a purposeful stride, her Navy uniform crisp, medals gleaming despite the overcast light. Every step she took echoed authority. The crew snapped to attention, their salute crisp and synchronized. Sinclair's gaze swept across them like a hawk's, taking in every detail. When her eyes met Harper's, a flicker of challenge passed between them, a silent duel of wills. Harper squared his shoulders and returned the salute. "Admiral Sinclair, welcome aboard the USS Valor." Sinclair nodded curtly. "Captain Harper, I expect full reports immediately. We have no time for complacency." Harper felt a jolt of something fierce stir inside, defiance, perhaps, or the need to prove himself. "Understood, ma'am. We're ready for your inspection." The Admiral's lips curved in a brief, tight smile. "Good, then let's begin." The crew was ordered to their stations, and the mission briefing room buzzed with anticipation. Sinclair wasted no time, cutting through the usual formalities with sharp questions and pointed critiques. She dissected Harper's strategy with precision, challenging his decisions on patrol routes, engagement protocols, and crew readiness. Harper bristled under her scrutiny, but he kept his expression calm. Inside, a storm raged. He knew Sinclair was testing him, pushing for weaknesses to exploit. The clash of leadership styles was palpable, Harper's instinctive boldness against Sinclair's cold calculation. Outside, the sea darkened further, the first drops of rain splattering against the windows. The tension inside the room mirrored the tempest brewing in the sky. Harper caught the Admiral's gaze again. There was no room for error, no margin for failure. The mission, the ship, and the lives aboard depended on their ability to find common ground, or at least to coexist. As the briefing ended, the crew dispersed, their chatter a low murmur of speculation and anxiety. Harper lingered, staring out at the storm, wondering what lay ahead. The real battle wasn't just with foreign threats, but the one unfolding silently between two formidable leaders. The USS Valor sailed onward into uncertain waters, both literal and metaphorical. And somewhere in the dark clouds above, a storm was gathering, one that would test the limits of authority, trust, and survival. The helicopter blades thrashed violently against the gusting wind, tearing through the overcast sky as the USS Valor sliced through the choppy sea below. Admiral Lara Sinclair's sharp eyes remained fixed on the deck beneath her, the ship's steel frame rising like a giant beast against the gray backdrop. Each second closer to the ship tightened the grip of tension in her chest. She was not here to make friends. As the helicopter touched down on the landing pad, the rotors spun down with a thunderous clatter. Sinclair stepped out, her boots meeting the cold steel deck with practiced certainty. The salty spray of the sea stung her face, but she welcomed the rawness. It reminded her she was alive, that she carried the weight of command on her shoulders. The crew snapped to attention, their disciplined formation a testament to the ship's relentless training. Their eyes flicked nervously between her and Captain James Harper, the man tasked with leading the ship through some of the Navy's most dangerous waters. Sinclair's reputation had preceded her, and the tension between her and Harper was palpable. Harper, standing rigid at the center of the deck, met her gaze with a mix of defiance and unease. He was a man accustomed to being in control, to calling the shots. Now, that control was being challenged in the most direct way imaginable. "Captain Harper," Sinclair said, her voice steady but sharp, cutting through the whipping wind. "I trust you've prepared a full status report. Time is short, and we have a mission to complete." Harper squared his shoulders and saluted. "Yes, ma'am. Everything is operational. The crew is ready, and the ship is prepared for any contingency." "Good," she nodded curtly. "Let's proceed inside for the briefing." The tension followed them as they entered the ship's command center, a stark room lined with monitors, digital maps, and humming equipment. The crew gathered quietly, eyes darting between the two commanding officers. Sinclair wasted no time. "Captain, I've reviewed your initial strategy. There are weaknesses that could jeopardize the mission. I'm here to ensure the ship operates at its highest capacity. That means questioning every decision." Harper's jaw tightened, his gaze steady. "I welcome scrutiny, Admiral. But this crew operates on discipline and trust. I won't tolerate undermining that." Sinclair's eyes narrowed slightly, her expression unreadable. "Discipline is earned, not demanded. Trust is built on competence and accountability. Remember that." The crew listened in silence, sensing the subtle but unmistakable power struggle unfolding before them. Harper and Sinclair represented two different eras of Command Harper, the seasoned but sometimes impulsive leader who believed in decisive action. Sinclair, the calculated strategist who prized precision and control. As the briefing continued, Sinclair peppered Harper with tough questions about his tactics, his contingency plans, and the readiness of his crew. Harper responded firmly, but felt the growing pressure of her relentless scrutiny. At one point, Sinclair pointed to a digital map highlighting a vulnerable patrol route. "Captain, this approach exposes the ship to unnecessary risk. Why not reroute here, where we have better surveillance?" Harper hesitated, then explained. The route was chosen to project strength and deter any hostile moves. Changing it now could signal uncertainty. Sinclair shook her head. "Strength isn't just about boldness. It's about calculated risk management. Your approach could lead to an ambush." Their exchange drew the room's attention, the tension thickening like fog. The crew sensed that this was more than a strategic debate. It was a contest for control, respect, and survival. After the briefing, Harper felt the weight of Sinclair's presence more keenly than ever. She wasn't just an inspector, she was a challenge to everything he believed about leadership. And that challenge was personal. Later, as the ship navigated through increasingly turbulent waters, Harper found himself walking the deck alone, the storm clouds now heavy and swollen overhead. The salty wind bit through his jacket, but his thoughts were inside, tangled with doubts and the relentless pressure of command. Suddenly, a voice called out behind him. "Captain." He turned to see Sinclair approaching, her expression unreadable, but eyes sharp. The rain had started, light at first, then heavier, soaking their uniforms quickly. "We need to talk," she said firmly. Harper nodded, leading her below deck to a quieter room. The crew passed them with curious glances, sensing the gravity of their meeting. Inside the small conference room, away from prying eyes and ears, Sinclair crossed her arms. "Your crew is loyal, but there's a fragility here you're not addressing. Morale is low. Fear and frustration are simmering beneath the surface." Harper met her gaze. "I know the crew better than anyone. They respect order, discipline. They follow commands." "Respect isn't fear," Sinclair replied sharply. "You may have authority, but do you have trust? That's what keeps a ship together when everything else falls apart." Harper's frustration flared. "I don't need lessons in leadership from someone who hasn't been in the trenches with this crew." Sinclair's eyes hardened. "I've been where you are, Captain. But leadership isn't about being the loudest or the strongest. It's about knowing when to listen, when to adapt. Otherwise, you risk losing everything." The words stung, but Harper swallowed his pride. He knew she was right in some ways, though his stubbornness kept him from admitting it openly. The rain hammered against the ship's hull, a relentless rhythm echoing the storm inside him. For a moment, they stood in silence, the clash of wills palpable. "Tomorrow," Sinclair said finally, "I want a full review of crew morale and readiness. No more surprises." Harper nodded reluctantly. "Understood." As Sinclair left the room, Harper felt the weight of impending change settle over him like a shadow. This wasn't just an inspection, it was a reckoning. Back on the deck, a storm broke with fury, wind and rain lashing the ship. The crew moved with urgent purpose, securing equipment and bracing for the tempest. Harper watched them, the lines between duty, fear, and determination blurring. The USS Valor was a ship built for war, but the fiercest battles were sometimes fought within. Harper knew the coming days would test not only his command, but the very soul of the crew he was sworn to lead. And somewhere in the raging storm above, the arrival of Admiral Sinclair marked the beginning of a confrontation that would change everything. The dawn broke over the restless ocean with little mercy. Rain hammered relentlessly against the USS Valor's deck, the wind howling through the ship's superstructure like a furious beast. Inside the steel confines of the command center, Captain James Harper and Admiral Lara Sinclair prepared for what neither could fully escape, a clash of wills that threatened to consume them both. The room was tense, electric, with the unspoken conflict that simmered just beneath the surface. Sinclair sat upright at the head of the table, her posture rigid and precise, eyes piercing through the dim fluorescent light as she scanned the latest reports displayed on the digital monitors. Harper stood nearby, arms crossed, his face taut with simmering frustration. "Captain," Sinclair began, voice calm but sharp, "the current patrol route is a strategic liability. We cannot afford to gamble on boldness without a backup plan." Harper's jaw tightened. The route is designed to assert dominance in these contested waters. It's a show of strength. Pulling back now would embolden our adversaries. Sinclair's gaze hardened. Strength is not just bravado, Harper. It's calculated. It's discipline. Recklessness will cost lives. The two locked eyes, the room charged with tension. Around them, junior officers shuffled nervously, caught between respect for both leaders and the desire for peace. Harper gestured to the holographic map hovering above the table, his finger tracing the patrol line cutting close to a known surveillance zone. This approach keeps the enemy guessing. It forces them to react to us. If we retreat, we lose the initiative. Sinclair shook her head slowly. "You're risking the ship and crew on assumptions, Captain. Intelligence shows increased drone activity. We cannot engage them head-on without proper countermeasures in place." Harper's eyes flashed with frustration. "I'm well aware of the intelligence. We're prepared. The crew is ready. I won't second-guess my decisions because you question my leadership style." The room fell silent. Sinclair's gaze didn't waver. "Leadership isn't about ego, Harper. It's about responsibility for every man and woman aboard this ship." A junior officer, Lieutenant Ramirez, cleared his throat softly. "Sir, Admiral Sinclair has a point. We've detected multiple low-orbit drones approaching the patrol zone. Our current electronic countermeasures might be insufficient if we stick to this route." Harper inhaled deeply, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. He appreciated Ramirez's insight, but the challenge to his authority stung. "Prepare enhanced countermeasures," he commanded, voice low but resolute. "We will maintain our course." Sinclair's expression was unreadable, but a subtle nod betrayed her acceptance of his command for now. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and recalibration. Sinclair personally oversaw the strengthening of electronic defenses, coordinating with the communications team and weapons officers. Harper, though bristling, recognized the necessity and worked alongside her, the uneasy partnership fraught with silent tension. Outside the command center, the crew watched their leaders' interactions with a mixture of anxiety and hope. The Valor's mission was critical, but the internal battle unfolding was equally vital. A test of leadership, trust, and the fragile balance of command. Later, as night fell, the storm outside worsened. Thunder rumbled overhead, lightning briefly illuminating the warship as it pitched through towering waves. Inside, Harper and Sinclair convened the senior officers for a status briefing. Harper stood at the front, his voice steady but edged with fatigue. The patrol route remains unchanged. We're relying on our countermeasures and crew readiness to mitigate threats. Sinclair stepped forward, her tone precise. We have increased drone surveillance. Engagement protocols are updated. I urge all officers to adhere strictly to operational procedures. No unnecessary risks. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs. Sinclair's words carried weight, but Harper's authority was unmistakable. The crew was caught between two leaders whose visions clashed, but whose goals aligned. After the briefing, Harper found himself alone on the bridge, staring out into the stormy night. The rain streaked the windows as lightning flashed, casting fleeting shadows across his weary face. Behind him, footsteps approached. Sinclair's voice broke the silence. "Captain, we need to talk." He turned to see her framed by the dim lighting, her face a mask of determination. "What now, Admiral?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This mission isn't just about tactics and patrols. It's about people. Your crew is on edge. Morale is slipping. They respect you, but they fear your temper." Harper's eyes flashed. "I demand discipline. Fear keeps order." Sinclair's gaze pierced him. "Fear breeds resentment. It breaks teams. Leadership requires more than orders. It requires trust." He swallowed hard, frustration and pride warring inside him. "You don't know what it takes to command this ship." "I know what it takes to lead," she replied quietly. "And right now, that means bridging the gap between authority and respect." The storm outside intensified, the ship shuddering under the weight of the tempest. Inside, the clash between Harper and Sinclair mirrored the chaos of the sea, a battle of wills with no clear victor. As the night wore on, Harper wrestled with the truth in Sinclair's words. His command style, forged in decades of rigid discipline and command, was being challenged by a new paradigm, one where strength was measured not by dominance, but by connection. In the solitude of the bridge, surrounded by the roar of the storm, Harper faced an unsettling question. Could he adapt? Or was his way of command destined to crack under pressure? The USS Valor surged forward into the unknown, its leaders locked in a silent war that threatened to unravel everything they had fought for. The storm outside the USS Valor raged with relentless fury, waves crashing against the hull like thunderous fists, rain slashing sideways through the steel-framed windows. Inside the ship's lower corridors, the tension was nearly as violent as the tempest above. Captain James Harper paced with clenched fists, his breath coming in shallow bursts, every nerve on edge. His mind replayed the events of the past days like a merciless drumbeat, the unyielding scrutiny of Admiral Sinclair, the constant friction between their commands, the whispers among the crew. The captain's sense of control was slipping through his fingers like water in a storm drain. For years, he had commanded with authority that was unquestioned, his word law aboard the ship. Now, the arrival of Sinclair had ignited a powder keg of doubts and resentment, not just among the crew, but within Harper himself. Harper's boots echoed down the corridor as he made his way toward the strategy room, where Sinclair was known to be reviewing the latest intelligence reports. His chest tightened, anger and frustration bubbling dangerously close to the surface. He felt cornered, undermined, and pushed to a breaking point. The door to the strategy room was ajar, a faint glow spilling into the dim hallway. Harper hesitated, then pushed it open without knocking. Inside, Admiral Sinclair was bent over the digital map table, her face illuminated by the shifting tactical displays. She looked up as Harper entered, eyes sharp and unyielding. "Captain," she said, voice steady but cold. "I was expecting you." Harper closed the door behind him with a harsh click. "Admiral, we need to talk." Sinclair's expression remained unreadable as she gestured to a chair, but Harper stayed standing. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. "Your tactics are reckless," Sinclair began, cutting straight to the point. "You're risking this ship and crew on impulses, not strategy." Harper's face flushed with anger. "I'm responsible for this ship's safety. I know my crew better than anyone. Your constant interference undermines that." Sinclair's eyes narrowed. "And your temper undermines your judgment." The words hit Harper like a slap. He stepped closer, his voice low and raw. "I don't have to take this from you." For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, taut and dangerous. Then Harper's control snapped. His hand shot out before he could stop it, slamming Sinclair hard against the steel wall behind her. The impact echoed sharply in the confined space. Sinclair's breath caught, but her eyes burned with fierce defiance. She didn't flinch or cry out. Instead, she stared up at him, unbroken, unyielding. Harper's chest heaved. The adrenaline coursing through him was a wildfire out of control. "What? What have I done?" he whispered, stepping back as the weight of his actions crashed over him. Sinclair pushed off the wall, regaining her composure with practiced calm. "You lost control, Captain," she said quietly. "And that's the real danger." The room seemed to close in around them, the sound of rain pounding on the hull, the only noise filling the heavy silence. Outside, the crew had heard the thud and held their breath, frozen by the sudden, unmistakable tension. Whispers spread quickly through the ship like wildfire. The captain had struck the Admiral. The line between order and chaos shattered in an instant. Harper backed away, the rage draining from his face and replaced by raw shame and confusion. He sank into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. Sinclair stood steady, despite the moment's shock, and surveyed him with a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "This changes everything," she said softly. "Not just for you, but for all of us." The investigation was swift and unforgiving. The Navy's strict codes of conduct left no room for leniency, especially in matters of discipline and violence. Harper was confined to his quarters, stripped temporarily of command duties, pending a full inquiry. The crew's morale teetered on a knife's edge, some still loyal to their captain, others fearing the consequences of his outburst. Meanwhile, Sinclair assumed direct command with a steely determination, knowing she had to restore order while navigating the fragile undercurrents of loyalty and fear. The halls of the USS Valor felt colder now, the echoes of that one violent moment lingering in every corridor and every whispered conversation. In his isolation, Harper was left to confront the consequences of his breaking point. The pride that had carried him through decades of command now felt like chains binding him to failure. The image of Sinclair steady, defiant, unbroken haunted him. He realized, painfully, that his greatest enemy was not external, but within himself, the fury he had never fully mastered. Sinclair, for her part, carried the heavy burden of leadership with grim resolve. She knew that to steer the ship through the storm ahead, she needed more than strategy. She needed to heal the fractures that violence and fear had inflicted on the crew. The ship continued its relentless journey through the tempest, every crashing wave a reminder of the turmoil inside. And beneath the surface, the real battle was only just beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation between Captain James Harper and Admiral Lavra Sinclair cast a shadow over the USS Valor that felt heavier than the storm clouds pressing down from above. The crew, once a tightly knit force bound by discipline and loyalty, now found themselves divided, caught between allegiance to their captain and respect for the Admiral's unwavering authority. The tension was palpable, simmering beneath every glance and whispered conversation as the ship forged ahead through turbulent waters, both literal and figurative. Harper's quarters felt like a prison. Confined and silent, he was left alone to wrestle with the consequences of his actions. The moment his anger exploded into violence, shattering the fragile equilibrium of the ship. The temporary suspension of his command duties was a bitter pill, compounded by the gnawing uncertainty about his future in the Navy. Pride, once his shield and sword, now threatened to crush him under its weight. He sat by the narrow window of his quarters, staring out at the roiling sea. The endless gray waves mirrored the turmoil in his mind. What had driven him to lose control? Was it exhaustion, the relentless pressure, or something deeper, the fear of losing command, of being replaced? Questions swirled, but answers eluded him. Meanwhile, Admiral Sinclair was thrust into the eye of the storm. Taking command of the USS Valor was no longer a matter of asserting strategy or debating patrol routes. It was about re-establishing order, restoring morale, and steering a fractured crew toward a common purpose. Every decision carried weight, every action scrutinized. In the command center, Sinclair convened a meeting with the senior officers. Her voice was steady, commanding respect without demanding it through fear. "We are a unit," she began. "This ship depends on each of us, on discipline, trust, and cooperation. We cannot afford divisions. I expect professionalism and loyalty, not just to me, but to the mission and to each other." Lieutenant Ramirez, who had spoken up during the earlier debates, nodded thoughtfully. "Admiral, some of the crew are struggling with the change in leadership. There's uncertainty, even resentment." Sinclair's expression hardened. "Then we must address that head-on. I will hold a town hall, an open forum where the crew can voice concerns directly. Transparency is crucial." Word of the upcoming town hall spread quickly, stirring both hope and apprehension among the crew. For many, it was an opportunity to be heard, to bridge the growing gap between command and the enlisted ranks. For others, it was a reminder of the deep fractures beneath the surface. Harper, confined and isolated, learned of the town hall through muted whispers during his limited contact with the outside world. The knowledge stoked a complicated mix of emotions, an urge to defend his legacy and crew, alongside a gnawing realization that he could no longer lead as he once had. The day of the town hall arrived under a rare break in the storm. The ship's mess hall, normally bustling with casual camaraderie, was transformed into a solemn assembly hall. Rows of chairs faced a makeshift stage where Sinclair stood, flanked by senior officers and a visibly nervous Harper, escorted for the event. The room buzzed with tension as crew members took their seats, eyes flickering between the two leaders. Sinclair opened the meeting with a measured tone, acknowledging the turmoil without shying away from the difficult truths. "We have faced challenges that test not just our skills, but our character," she said. "Our unity is our greatest strength, but it must be earned through trust and respect. This forum is your opportunity to speak openly and honestly." Hands hesitated to rise at first, then one by one, crew members voiced their fears, frustrations, and hopes. A communications specialist spoke of the strain of constant drills. A young sailor expressed confusion about the conflicting commands they had received. A veteran petty officer questioned Harper's suspension, but admitted the need for accountability. Harper listened, the weight of each word pressing on his conscience. For the first time in days, he felt a faint connection to the crew he had commanded for so long, their voices piercing through the isolation and anger. When it was his turn to speak, Harper rose slowly, clearing his throat. His voice was rough but earnest. "I've made mistakes. I let my anger get the best of me. For that, I'm sorry to all of you. But I want you to know, I have always acted with the safety of this ship and crew in mind." A murmur rippled through the crowd, some skeptical, others moved by his honesty. Sinclair stepped forward next. "Captain Harper's apology is a start, but leadership demands more than words. It demands action, accountability, and a willingness to grow. We must all strive to be better, for ourselves and for each other." The meeting closed with a cautious sense of renewed purpose, but the fissures beneath the surface remained. Sinclair knew rebuilding trust would take time, patience, and unwavering resolve. As the days passed, the crew settled into a tentative rhythm under Sinclair's command. Patrols continued, strategies adjusted, and the USS Valor sailed steadily through the choppy seas. But beneath the routine, the delicate balance of power and loyalty was still fragile. One evening, as Harper walked the dimly lit corridors allowed limited freedom to move under supervision, he encountered Lieutenant Ramirez. The young officer approached cautiously. "Captain, I wanted to say, I respect your service. This ship owes a lot to you." Harper nodded slowly, appreciating the gesture. "Thank you, Lieutenant. That means more than you know." Ramirez hesitated, then spoke with quiet determination. "If you're willing, I believe there's a way to bring the crew back together. But it will take leaders on both sides willing to listen." Harper met his gaze, the truth settling in. Leadership wasn't just about issuing orders or commanding fear. It was about connection, something he had lost sight of, but might still reclaim. Across the ship, Admiral Sinclair prepared for the challenges ahead. The mission was far from over, and the true test of their leadership was yet to come. In the heart of the storm, lines had been drawn, but whether they would divide or unite the USS Valor depended on the choices yet to be made. The USS Valor glided through the restless sea, the storm having passed, but leaving the ship and its crew shrouded in an uneasy calm. Above deck, the night was cold and clear, the stars scattered like distant beacons in the black velvet sky. Below, the ship's interior hummed with the quiet energy of a crew on edge, each individual caught in the web of shifting loyalties and hidden doubts. Admiral Laura Sinclair stood alone on the bridge, her silhouette framed against the glowing panels that mapped the ship's course. Her mind churned, reflecting on the fragile truce forged in recent days. The uneasy peace between her and Captain James Harper was just that, a truce, not trust. Beneath the surface, old wounds festered, and unseen currents pulled the crew in conflicting directions. Sinclair's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Ramirez, his footsteps purposeful as he approached the Admiral. "Admiral, there's something you should see," Ramirez said quietly, eyes flickering with unease. Sinclair raised an eyebrow. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Ramirez handed her a tablet displaying intercepted communications. The encrypted messages detailed movements of unknown vessels shadowing the USS Valor's patrol route, stealthy, elusive, and clearly monitoring their every move. "We've been under surveillance longer than we thought," Ramirez explained. "These aren't just routine scans. Someone's gathering intelligence, waiting for the right moment." Sinclair's expression hardened. "This confirms my concerns. Our patrol route was compromised even before we arrived." She tapped the screen, zooming in on the data. "We need to tighten security protocols immediately. I want all electronic communications monitored for unusual activity. No leaks, no surprises." Ramirez nodded. "Understood, Admiral." As the lieutenant left to execute the orders, Sinclair's mind raced. The enemy wasn't just out there in the open ocean. They were inside the shadows, weaving a web of espionage and deceit. Meanwhile, Captain Harper sat in his quarters, wrestling with his frustration and isolation. Despite his suspension, his sense of responsibility had not wavered. The intercepted communications briefing had been shared with him, a sign that Sinclair still valued his insights despite their fraught relationship. He picked up the secure comm device and dialed Ramirez. "Lieutenant, I want a full analysis of these transmissions. We need to know who's watching us and why." Ramirez responded promptly. "Yes, Captain. I'll have a report within the hour." As Harper ended the call, a soft knock came at his door. It was Ensign Harris, a young communications officer whose loyalty had never wavered. "Captain, if you don't mind, I wanted to check in," Harris said hesitantly. "The crew's been unsettled. Your absence weighs on them." Harper gave a tired smile. "Thank you, Harris. I appreciate that. Tell the crew to stay focused. We have a mission to complete." Back on the bridge, Sinclair convened a meeting with their senior staff, determined to root out the shadows threatening their mission. "We face threats from both outside and within," Sinclair warned. "Espionage can come from any level. I want a thorough vetting of all personnel with access to sensitive information." Commander Evans, the ship's security chief, nodded grimly. "We'll tighten security measures and conduct discreet investigations." Sinclair continued, her voice steely. "This ship is a team, but trust must be earned. I expect every officer to lead by example." The meeting concluded, but the undercurrents of suspicion lingered like a dark cloud. As the hours stretched on, Sinclair found herself reflecting on the fragile nature of loyalty in times of crisis. Harper, meanwhile, was deep in thought. His pride had been bruised, but his commitment to the crew and mission remained unbroken. He resolved to prove that leadership wasn't about rank or titles. It was about earning trust through action, especially when shadows threatened to consume them all. Later that night, Harper received a secure message. It was from an anonymous source within the crew information about a possible mole leaking classified data to enemy forces. The message was brief but chilling. "Trust no one. The enemy is closer than you think." Harper's heart pounded. He knew this revelation would shatter the fragile peace aboard the Valor if mishandled. He contacted Sinclair immediately. "Admiral, we have a potential security breach. Someone inside is compromising the mission." Sinclair's voice was calm but resolute. "We'll handle this carefully. No accusations without proof. But we must act swiftly." Together, Sinclair and Harper coordinated a covert investigation, balancing the need for discretion with the urgency of the threat. Days passed with the crew, unaware of the storm brewing beneath their feet. Sinclair and Harper, once adversaries, found themselves united by a common enemy within a shadow that threatened to unravel everything. Their alliance was fragile, built on necessity rather than trust, but it was the only way forward. In the quiet moments between chaos, Sinclair wondered if this mission would be the true test, not of tactics or strength, but of loyalty, resilience, and the power to forgive. And somewhere in the depths of the USS Valor, the enemy watched and waited, ready to strike. The USS Valor sailed through the night, its hull cutting through the waves with relentless precision. Inside, the ship was alive with a nervous energy that no amount of routine could suppress. The crew went about their duties with an undercurrent of suspicion threading through their every move. The threat of a mole aboard, the unseen enemy hung heavy in the air like a specter, unseen but ever present. Captain James Harper sat in his quarters, the dim light casting long shadows across the walls. Despite his suspension, he was determined not to be sidelined. His mind was a battleground of regret and resolve. He replayed the moments leading to his outburst against Admiral Sinclair over and over. His failure to control his temper had cost him his command and fractured the crew's trust. Yet now more than ever, he understood that leadership was about more than rank. It was about protecting the crew and mission, no matter the personal cost. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Ramirez entered, carrying a tablet with a sullen expression. "Captain, I have the analysis of the intercepted communications," Ramirez said quietly. Harper gestured for him to continue. "Go ahead." Ramirez tapped the screen, pulling up decrypted messages and data logs. The transmissions point to multiple sources, but one pattern stands out. There's a frequency being used to relay classified information to an unknown recipient. It's highly encrypted, but we managed to crack part of it. Harper leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Who is behind this?" "That's the problem," Ramirez admitted. "The source is coming from within the ship. Someone with access to sensitive systems." Harper's heart sank. "A traitor aboard the Valor." Ramirez nodded grimly. "We've narrowed down the suspects based on access logs and behavioral anomalies. But without concrete proof, it's hard to act without causing panic." Harper clenched his fists. "We can't wait for this to blow up in our faces. Lives are at stake." Meanwhile, aboard the bridge, Admiral Sinclair stood surrounded by her officers, reviewing the same data with a critical eye. Her usual composed demeanor was tempered by concern. She knew that uncovering the mole was crucial, not just for security, but to restore trust among the crew. "We need to move carefully," Sinclair instructed. "False accusations could fracture the crew further. But if we don't act, the consequences could be catastrophic." Commander Evans, the head of security, nodded in agreement. "I'll start increased surveillance and discreet interviews. We'll monitor communications closely." As the investigation deepened, whispers and paranoia spread among the crew. Every glance seemed laden with suspicion, every mistake scrutinized as a possible sign of betrayal. Morale, already fragile, began to fray. Harper, despite his confinement, became a focal point of conflicting emotions. Some crew members saw him as a fallen leader, others as a scapegoat, caught in the crossfire of political power. Yet many still respected his dedication and experience. One evening, Harper was approached by Ensign Harris, the young communications officer who had remained loyal. "Captain," Harris said nervously, "I think I've found something. There's been unusual activity on the ship's internal network files accessed at odd hours, unauthorized logins." Harper's eyes lit up. "Show me." They pored over the data, tracing digital footprints through the labyrinthine systems. The evidence pointed to someone with high-level clearance, someone who knew how to cover their tracks. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on Harper's shoulders. "We need to bring this to Sinclair." He sent a secure message, requesting an immediate meeting. In the strategy room, Sinclair received Harper with a measured expression. The tension between them was still palpable, but necessity forced cooperation. Harper laid out the findings, emphasizing the urgency. Sinclair listened intently, her respect for Harper's expertise growing despite their history. "We'll work together," she said firmly. "For the crew and the mission." The joint investigation accelerated. Surveillance teams increased patrols, and anonymous tip lines were established to encourage the crew to report suspicious behavior. Late one night, as the ship sailed through a fog bank, Commander Evans summoned Sinclair and Harper to the security control room. "We've caught something," Evans announced, eyes grave. A data transfer attempt from one of the communications officers, Lieutenant Parker. The news was a shock. Parker had been regarded as competent and reliable. His sudden implication shattered the fragile trust further. Sinclair nodded, steeling herself. "Detain him quietly. We'll question him before this escalates." Parker was brought in under guard, his demeanor calm, but eyes flickering with something unreadable. During the interrogation, cracks began to show in his composure. "I'm loyal to this ship," Parker insisted. "You have no proof." But under persistent questioning and presentation of intercepted communications, his facade crumbled. "I was pressured," he confessed. "I didn't want to betray my crew, but I had no choice." Sinclair's eyes narrowed. "Who pressured you?" Parker hesitated, then whispered a name that shocked everyone. An officer from the command staff, someone trusted and respected. The revelation sent ripples through the crew and command. A deeper conspiracy was unfolding, one that threatened to engulf the USS Valor in chaos. Sinclair and Harper exchanged a grim look. Their battle was no longer just against external enemies. It was a war within. As dawn approached, the ship's atmosphere shifted from suspicion to urgent resolve. The mission was clear: root out the unseen enemy before they could destroy everything the crew had fought for. Harper, once sidelined and broken, found new purpose. His journey toward redemption was far from over. Sinclair, the steadfast Admiral, prepared to lead not just a ship, but a divided family through the storm. The USS Valor sailed onward, shadows closing in from all sides, but its heart beat strong, fueled by courage, loyalty, and the unyielding will to survive. The USS Valor moved through the gray dawn like a beast rising from the depths, its steel frame unyielding amid the churning sea. The storm within the ship had not passed. If anything, it had intensified. The revelation of betrayal among the command ranks sent shockwaves throughout the crew, fracturing their sense of security and testing the bonds that held them together. Admiral Laura Sinclair stood on the bridge, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. The weight of leadership settled on her shoulders like a mantle forged in fire. Every decision she made now carried the consequences not just of strategy, but of trust and survival. Beside her stood Captain James Harper, his suspension lifted, but his role still uncertain. The path to redemption was long, but he was determined to walk it. The events of the past weeks had stripped away his pride, exposing a man who understood that leadership was about sacrifice, humility, and strength born from vulnerability. Together, Sinclair and Harper faced the daunting task of purging the USS Valor of its hidden enemy. The hunt for truth, the investigation intensified, with Commander Evans coordinating a comprehensive operation to identify all conspirators involved in the espionage. The name Parker had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Interrogations expanded to include personnel across departments, with every piece of evidence meticulously analyzed. The ship's security protocols were overhauled. Access to sensitive information was restricted, and surveillance heightened. Rumors swirled among the crew. Some whispered of a shadow network operating deep within the ship's systems, while others feared more sinister forces at play. Sinclair held regular briefings to maintain transparency, knowing that honesty was essential to rebuilding trust. "We will root out those who betray us," she declared firmly. "But we will do so with justice and fairness. This ship is our home, and we protect it together." Harper worked closely with the security teams, his technical knowledge proving invaluable in uncovering digital footprints left by the traitors. His hands trembled at times, the scars of his past mistakes still fresh, but his resolve was unwavering. A betrayal revealed days past, and the net began to tighten. New evidence pointed toward Lieutenant Commander Price, a senior officer with unparalleled access and an unblemished record. Price's calm demeanor had earned him the respect of many, but behind the facade was a man driven by ambition and a secret agenda. When confronted, Price initially denied all accusations, but the mounting proof was undeniable. Encrypted transmissions, suspicious meetings logged by surveillance, and digital traces of unauthorized data transfers painted a damning picture. Sinclair and Harper oversaw Price's detention. The betrayal was personal. Price had been a mentor to many, including some of Sinclair's own trusted officers. In a quiet, tense interrogation room, Price faced the two leaders. "You don't understand," Price sneered. "I was doing what was necessary. The Navy is outdated, rigid, and blind to the real threats. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." Sinclair's eyes blazed with fury. "Your greater good endangered every life on this ship." Harper's voice was cold and steady. "You betrayed your own crew. You will answer for that." Price's arrogance cracked as he realized the depth of the forces aligned against him. Healing the divide, with the traitors exposed and removed, Sinclair and Harper turned their focus to healing the crew. The wounds left by suspicion and betrayal ran deep, but so did the loyalty forged through shared hardship. Sinclair organized team-building exercises and open forums, encouraging dialogue and rebuilding camaraderie. Harper personally visited crew quarters, speaking with individuals, listening to their concerns, and offering support. Slowly, the ship began to breathe again. Trust was tentative but growing. The crew's shared commitment to the mission and each other became the foundation of renewed strength. A new mission, with the internal threat neutralized, the USS Valor resumed its patrols, the crew united under renewed leadership. Sinclair and Harper, once adversaries locked in conflict, now worked in tandem, their combined experience and respect a powerful force. Their partnership was a testament to the power of redemption and collaboration, a lesson learned through hardship. The final test, the true test, came unexpectedly. An unidentified hostile fleet emerged on the horizon, threatening to ambush the USS Valor and its convoy. Sinclair and Harper led the ship's defense with precision and courage, drawing on every lesson learned from their trials. The battle was fierce. Missiles streaked across the sky, and the ship shuddered under heavy fire. Harper coordinated damage control, inspiring the crew with calm determination. Sinclair commanded the tactical response, outmaneuvering the enemy and protecting the convoy. Their combined leadership turned the tide, and the hostile fleet was repelled. Redemption realized, after the battle, the crew gathered on deck, the dawn light washing over their tired but triumphant faces. Sinclair addressed them, her voice strong and proud. "We faced enemies within and without. We stood divided and now stand united. This victory is ours because we fought together." Harper stepped forward, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "Leadership isn't about power. It's about responsibility. I'm honored to serve alongside all of you." The crew erupted in cheers, a powerful affirmation of their unity and resilience. Epilogue. A new beginning in the quiet moments after the battle. Sinclair and Harper stood side by side, gazing out at calm sea. The storm had passed, but the journey continued. They had learned that true leadership required humility, courage, and the willingness to change. The USS Valor was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of strength forged through adversity. Together, Sinclair and Harper faced the horizon, ready to navigate whatever challenges lay ahead. Theirs was a story of redemption and resolve, a testament to the power of forgiveness, trust, and the unbreakable spirit of those who serve.